In a war hospital, a nurse pulls a live grenade from a soldier's chest. He survives, but 24 hours later, the unthinkable happens. Hidden fragments, military secrets, and a deadly betrayal. A story of courage, fear, and sacrifice at the very edge of human limits. The field hospital stands beside a broken road. In the distance, you hear engines, scattered gunfire, and sometimes nothing. But that nothing never lasts. The wind shakes the tents, carrying dust, the smell of metal, and a trace of smoke. Stretchers come in and out as if following an invisible current. No one runs without reason. Everyone knows chaos costs lives. The light is yellow and tired, hanging from cables that creak. On a table, instruments rest on trays, shining just enough. A generator hums, brrr brrr brrr, keeping the night alive with its simple rhythm. Silence, when it comes, is thin and fragile. The squeak of a wheel, the heavy thud of a boot, or a moan from someone waking up can break it. At the entrance, 2 soldiers carry in a wounded man. They don't waste words. A single look is enough to warn the others. Inside, voices are short, precise. Gauze, fluids, pressure. Next, no words are dressed up. There's no room for that here. Outside, the war is a storm. Inside, the hospital is a patched umbrella, but still standing. The air smells of iodine, rubber, and sweat. Footprints repeat across the floor, as if the same steps return again and again. In one corner, a board lists the basics: blood type, time of arrival, stable or unstable signs. The letters fade and return, like someone fighting against time. In another corner, a radio crackles. The news comes in broken pieces. Hill names, coordinates, orders shifting with the front. Nobody listens fully, yet everyone hears it. It's the rumor of a sea no one can see. The lined-up stretchers look like small boats. On them lie bodies that shake, breathe hard, or stay quiet. Some hands reach for others and find them. Some eyes are lost in the ceiling, others fixed on an empty point, as if a doorway waits there. A doctor moves past, checking bandages. He doesn't ask for long stories, only about pain, fever, the immediate present. The present is the only coin that counts. The main tent is the heart of the place. There, the lights are stronger, the air hotter. The canvas traps heat from the lamps and the effort. The central table shines by duty, cleaned over and over without pause. Around it, scissors, clamps, syringes. Every tool has its place, and if not, one is found. A battered wall clock shows an uncertain hour, but its ticking still keeps order. No one argues with the tick-tock. Now and then, a distant blast makes the canvas tremble. Some glance upward by reflex, looking for a sky that isn't there. The hospital doesn't look up. It looks inward. A nurse adjusts an 4, whispering something to a patient. Not a promise, but it sounds like one. There are no speeches here. Only breath settling, pains easing, pains returning, and hands that stay. A stretcher bearer pushes carefully, as if the world were a fragile table. The wheel limps, but it gets there. Rest is a short story. A cup of lukewarm coffee, half a piece of bread, a minute with eyes closed. The night doesn't respect perfect shifts. When the canvas door opens, the air changes. Cold slips in. So does the certainty that the war hasn't stopped. New footsteps, new voices, another stretcher. Silence leaves without protest. It was never meant to last. On a shelf, a box of bandages looks like a brick house. What holds up this place is not columns, but repeated gestures. Wash, dry, stitch, right watch. Outside, the stars hide behind smoke. Inside, an extra flashlight hangs, ready for when the lights fail. They will fail. When it happens, no one shouts. Other lights turn on. Voices rise just enough. Hands follow paths they already know. At the exit, a table lists names, some marked with a thick line, evacuate, others with two thin lines, observe. The word discharge appears rarely and is celebrated in silence with a small nod. There is no applause. The field hospital plays for time, and when it wins, it doesn't boast. Outside, the sky shifts color without warning. Inside, the clock insists. A gust of air lifts the canvas, revealing the edge of the camp for a second. Shadows move. Lights flicker in the distance. The war breathes like an animal. The hospital is a hand held open, making sure that breath continues. There are no caped heroes here. Only shifts, lists, wounds waiting, and wounds that can't wait. There is also one simple idea. As long as the tent stands, there will be a place to fight in another way. When the door closes, the sounds outside fade. Inside, the generator hums again. The hospital shrinks and expands like a lung. Sometimes, for a moment, it all seems still. It's a trick. A whisper, a step, a metal bell, and life starts moving again. Here, silence never lasts long, because life, when it chooses to stay, always makes noise. She didn't arrive at the hospital by chance. She came by choice, after a chain of days when the war seemed to move faster than the sun. She learned to fight without firing a single bullet. Her tools fit in one hand. Gauze, scalpel, thread, needle, small scissors that cut through silence when no one else can. Her name is Lucia, but almost no one uses full names here. Lou, they say, and she answers with a steady "on my way." No shouting. She doesn't like speeches. She likes work done right. The kind that keeps people alive without making noise. Before the front, Lucia trained in small rooms that smelled of bleach and had cold floors. There she learned that a steady pulse isn't a luxury, it's the base. She learned to wash wounds until the skin can take the water. She learned to listen to breathing like music. When it rises, when it falls, when it breaks. An old doctor once told her, "Haste blinds. Rhythm saves." Since then, she measures every step, every knot of thread, every second of waiting. The war pushes, she sets the pace. In the field hospital, her table is a map. On the left, the 4. On the right, forceps in order, from largest to smallest. The scalpel isn't a threat to her, it's a key. It opens only what's needed, never more. When dead tissue must go, she removes it. When pressure is needed, she applies it. Her hands speak, and the rest listen. If a teammate hesitates, she points to the next step. First clean, then close, then watch. It doesn't sound like a slogan. It sounds like a path, and paths are welcome here. Lucia traded fear for method. It's not that she has no fear. She learned to put it in a box while she works. Later, when the shift ends, she opens the box, looks inside, takes a deep breath, and closes it again. Some nights she can't. Then she sits with cold coffee and lets the generators hum clear her head. She reviews her hands, her moves, the small mistakes she'll fix the next day. She doesn't aim to be perfect. She aims not to repeat an error. Her voice has a tempo the wounded recognize. She doesn't promise miracles, but she offers clear steps. This will hurt a bit, but it will pass. Breathe with me. Look at that spot on the canvas and count to 10. People obey because there's solid ground in her voice. When light is short, she turns on her flashlight and sets the beam at the right angle. When water is scarce, she rations without losing cleanliness. When blood is low, she lines up donors with a calm that spreads. Something is always missing. Her job is to make it less visible. War taught Lucia to read eyes. Some ask for help. Others ask for permission to leave. She leans in, presses a bandage, adjusts the oxygen, holds a hand. She doesn't always win. When she can't, she stays one more minute in silence, then covers. She does it with respect, as if the body could still hear. Then she resets her table, changes gloves, and continues. Continuity is her way to resist. On the wall by her corner, a list is written in pencil. Clean, measure, decide, act. Not pretty words, anchors. Beside it, a cheap clock marks a minute that's never enough. She doesn't look at it with anger. She looks at it like a teammate who does their best. Time is short, yes, but cut into small pieces, it goes further. Sometimes a wounded person comes in, and the air tightens. She lowers her chin and focuses on the first task. The first task is always to look. The rest follows. Lucia also learned to say no. No to a maneuver she doesn't understand. No to an order that skips a vital step. No to improvisation that smells like disaster. Her no isn't harsh. It's clear. People who work with her know that no protects everyone. When she says yes, it's real. She rolls up her sleeves, asks for forceps, ties a knot that won't slip, snips the thread clean, and covers the wound with a dressing that breathes. Sometimes, when she's done, she rests her hand over the bandage and feels the pulse beneath. It's her way of saying, "I'm here." She brought only one family photo, the size of a card. It stays in the inner pocket of her gown. She doesn't look at it during a shift. She looks at it when she steps out for a breath of air. She isn't thinking of going home yet. She's thinking of finishing her shift without losing anyone to distraction. Her promise isn't grand. Treat each patient like the first of the day, even when they're the 20th. Some think fighting means holding a weapon. Lucia knows fighting is also stitching open skin, holding in 4, watching a fever, changing a bandage before it smells bad. Fighting is also telling a teammate to wash again, change gloves, breathe. In her world, courage is measured by consistency. If a gunshot is lightning, her work is the rain that settles the dust. If the war pushes to the edge, her hands push back to the center. Tonight, like every night, Lucia checks her table once more. She confirms the 4 bag, adjusts the light, sorts the gauze by size. Someone calls her name from the main tent. She answers, "On my way." She ties her hair, sets her mask, and walks. She doesn't carry a rifle. She carries her hands. The call came the way urgent things always do, without frills. Lou, to the main tent. Lucia put the flashlight back in its place, made sure her table was in order, and slipped through the canvas that separated her station from the central tent. The air there was thicker, as if every breath weighed a bit more. 2 stretcher-bearers came in at an angle, guarding each bump in the floor. On the stretcher lay a young soldier with skin the color of pale gray. He wasn't shouting. That odd calm, that silence that doesn't fit, was the first thing that set off Lucia's inner alarm. "Vitals," she said, without raising her voice. Pressure dropping, fast pulse, sats going down. The on-call doctor answered, eyes fixed on the monitor. Lucia moved to the left side and looked at the man's chest. Someone had made a quick dressing out of a t-shirt and tape, dark with blood that was both dry and damp. Under the fabric, something made a strange shape, a bulge that didn't match the body's map. Not a normal bruise. Not an obvious fracture. A hard lump in the center, slightly to the right, rising and falling with each breath, as if the chest were chewing on an object it couldn't swallow. "Name?" Lucia asked. "He says it's Mateo. They picked him up at kilometer 9. There was an explosion," the bearer said. Explosion. The word hung in the tent like an ember. An explosion doesn't always mean shrapnel in the chest. Sometimes it's just the blast wave. But that shape under the skin killed any comfort. Lucia cut the t-shirt with fine scissors from shoulder to sternum and gently lifted the makeshift dressing. She saw a clean entry wound, smaller than she expected. Almost a perfect bite on the ribcage. The worry wasn't the edge or the blood. It was the mass that throbbed with the heartbeat. A hard rise that seemed lodged in a space that didn't belong to it. "Hands off until we know," she said, stopping the bearer's hand. "Control first." She protected the field, asked for fluids at a steady rate, and placed a sterile towel around the area. With her other hand, she found a vein in the forearm. The soldier opened his eyes for a second, light-colored eyes darkened by dust. "Breathe with me," Lucia said. 1, 2. 1, 2. He obeyed. Every inhale lifted the bulge a fraction. Every exhale let it fall. It didn't quiver like a clot, and it didn't slide like a loose fragment. It felt anchored to something deep. The monitor beeped in short steps, a heart running so it wouldn't fall behind. "Back pain? Arms numb?" the doctor asked. "It's heavy here," the soldier whispered, flicking his eyes to the center of his chest, as if a stone hung from his breastbone. Lucia checked the skin around the wound. No wide burns, so likely no direct flame. The entry was clean, no dead edges. That suggested a high-speed object that, for some reason, had stopped. Where and why did it stop, she thought. She set her stethoscope. Breath sounds were rough but present. The heart pounded without clear murmurs. She looked again at the lump. When the lamp shifted, a faint glint appeared. Barely a reflection. Not fat, not bone. Something hard and foreign. "Portable X-ray," the doctor said. "No plates till transfer," someone answered from the back. Transfer, a big word for an unstable patient with a strange chest shape. Lucia adjusted the oxygen, opened the for a couple more drops a minute, and asked for hemostats, just in case. Here, just in case wasn't superstition. It was planning. She glanced at the removed bandage. In the middle of the t-shirt was a darker round stain, as if something had pressed from the inside. The soldier opened his eyes again, longer this time. "Were you conscious when they picked you up?" Lucia asked. "Yes, I felt a hit, people shouting, then nothing clear," Matteo said. "Did they move you a lot?" "They dragged me a few meters. They told me not to touch my chest," he murmured. "Don't touch my chest." Someone on the ground had already seen this area, couldn't stand mistakes. Lucia met the doctor's eyes. The obvious idea was to open and explore, but opening blind could turn a hard wound into a disaster. Not every strange thing in a chest is the same. Some strike back if you provoke them. "Let's stabilize more," Lucia said. "Keep the line, watch the pressure. No pressure on the center. No pressing, no sudden moves. Only support." She asked for a second peripheral line and prepped it in case the first failed. She resecured the sensors. The soldier's sweat was loosening them. She dried the skin with gauze, counted breaths, counted pulses. The lump kept its small dance. Up and down, like a clock hand trapped under the skin. A careful hush settled over the tent. Each step a choice, each choice a risk. "Age?" she asked. 22, the bearer said. 22, with a wound that didn't fit known patterns without imaging. Lucia swept the lamp across again, lower angle this time, and noticed a straighter edge on one side of the mass, as if part of its outline wasn't organic. The soldier shivered. She laid a light blanket around the area, leaving the center free. "Matteo, keep your arms still. Short, steady breaths, like this." The tent listened. Sometimes a hard case turns noise into echo. Everything falls into the rhythm of one task. No one touched the center. No one set tools on the bulge. No one tried to play hero. The generator dipped for a beat, then rose. In that small pocket of dimmer light, Lucia caught another detail. When the soldier coughed, the lump gave a dry, muted talk, a tone that didn't belong to living tissue. She filed it in the mental box she keeps for a shift. Dry tone, non-organic vibration, clean entry wound, fixed lump that beats with a heart. The mix pointed to an injury that demanded extreme respect. "Plan?" the doctor asked, looking at her. "Support," Watch the rhythm, prep the field. No pressure on the center. Wait for imaging or the smallest possible exploration. No one touches the object. No one, Lucia said, with a tone that locked the door on doubt. The soldier closed his eyes, worn out. Lucia loosened the pulse ox clip so it wouldn't read low. The war went on outside, but on that table the world had shrunk to a point. A chest with a shape that shouldn't be there, setting its own law beneath the skin. The surgical lamp hung over Matteo's chest, washing the sweaty skin with a white beam. What had been only suspicion minutes ago began to take shape with brutal certainty. Just under the sternum, slightly to the right, the bulge wasn't a random foreign body. It had straight edges, angles flesh can't invent. The way it caught the light left no doubt. This wasn't bone or loose shrapnel. It was a compact metal device, beating in time with the heart because it was lodged beside it. A murmur ran through the tent. People traded quick looks, each searching for confirmation in someone else's eyes. No one spoke the forbidden word, but everyone thought it. Grenade. There, where there should have been only flesh and blood. A threat waited to turn the room into hell. The on-call doctor swallowed and lowered his voice. If it's what we think, any move could be the last. Lucia breathed slowly. She didn't raise her eyes from the soldier's chest. She knew panic spreads faster than blood in a vein. And if fear set in, no hand would stay steady on the tools. She forced her voice into a neutral tone, like she was explaining a routine. The patient is still conscious. Keep his O2 up, steady fluids, and no one touches the object. The field stays clean and clear. The soldier cracked his eyes open. Dry lips moved. What do I have? Lucia looked him in the eye. She couldn't use the exact word. Not here. Not now. Something is lodged inside. We're keeping it from doing more harm. Breathe with me. Matteo gave a small nod, trusting that voice more easily than the reality around him. His chest rose and fell with effort, and with each breath the object seemed to shift just a hair, like it was dancing a grim duet with his heart. The monitor sped up. His pulse wanted to bolt. Lucia set a firm hand on his shoulder. With me. 1, 2, 1, 2. The rate eased, just enough to go on. In the corner, an assistant searched for a metal case of precision tools. The clink of steel on steel boomed too loud for the moment. Lucia turned her head slightly. Quiet. Every useless noise gets in the way. You could cut the tension with a sigh. Outside, wind slapped the canvas. Inside, everyone seemed to hold their breath, as if the room's air was tied to Matteo's chest. The generator droned low and steady. Under that hum came the monitor's beep, and beneath it, the wet thud of a heart fighting to keep going. The chief doctor leaned in, brow tight. If it's a grenade, we can't transfer him. A hard jolt on the way. Could be fatal. Lucia held his gaze. Here or never. No one argued. It was the hard truth. No helicopter, no big hospital would accept a body carrying that inside. In this improvised tent, they would decide whether Matteo lived or whether everything ended in seconds. The soldier started to cough. The cough made the device buzz, and that dry metal note sounded again, short, sharp, enough to freeze blood. 2 nurses stepped back on instinct. Lucia didn't move, her eyes fixed on the bulge, tracing each line, each edge, judging depth and how close it sat to the beating muscle. Prep a sterile field, she ordered. The bearer hesitated. Are we really going to? Prep the field, Lucia repeated, as calmly as if asking for gauze in any procedure. The soldier opened his eyes again, exhausted. Am I going to die? Lucia squeezed his shoulder. Not while I'm here. It was a dangerous promise, but a necessary one. The patient needed an anchor, and she chose to be it. The room clicked into place like a gear. Forceps ready, scalpels lined up, trays in order. The lamp dropped a little lower. The chief doctor drew a long breath. If we hit the detonator wrong, we won't touch it, Lucia cut in. Silence fell again. Everyone understood that this was more than surgery. It was disarming war in its purest, deadliest form, lodged in the chest of a 22-year-old man. Matteo closed his eyes. His forehead felt cold. Lucia asked for more light blankets on his limbs, keeping the chest clear. She knew there was no margin. One wrong press, one clumsy move, and it wouldn't just be the soldier. It would be all of them. The war had sent its message in the cruelest way. A human heart-sharing space with a device built to destroy hearts. And there, under the dull drone of the generator, Lucia decided she wouldn't step back. If death was on that table, so was the chance to beat it. The tent had become a stage where no one wanted to move too much. Outside, an entire platoon waited in silence. Soldiers used to shouts, gunfire, and engines had learned that silence could be an enemy too. They stood straight, rifles hanging from their shoulders, as if the smallest scrape of metal could pass through the canvas and trigger the unthinkable. The tension was so thick it felt like an invisible gas. Everyone struggled to breathe. Inside, the medical team adjusted their positions. No one spoke more than needed. The chief doctor, Lucia, and two assistants moved like chess pieces, measuring every step, every brush of instrument against tray. Even the generator's steady buzz seemed louder. The monitor showed Matteo's heartbeat, and, with every beep, everyone held their breath as if that sound were the metronome of their lives. The canvas door opened a crack, and a captain stepped in with a warrant officer. No helmets, no barked orders. They only traded quick looks with Lucia and the chief doctor. The captain gave a short signal to his men outside. Absolute silence. Then he stood still, watching, as if the discipline used to command battles now had to hold calm in an improvised operating room. The air inside grew heavier. The assistants felt that even breathing could be risky. Lucia, though, breathed slowly. Her routine turned into a shield. Each inhale was a silent order. Don't stop. Don't break. We're here. Her eyes moved from Matteo's chest to the monitors, from the monitors to the hands placing gauze, from the gauze to the forceps waiting in line. Her calm was a tight rope, and everyone held on. Matteo stayed conscious, though his voice was barely a whisper. "I'm cold," he murmured, and the tremble of his lips sent a chill through the room. Lucia leaned in. "That's normal. Don't talk. Focus on your breath." 1-2-1-2. He obeyed, struggling, sweat beading on his forehead. Each number from Lucia was like one more step across a fragile bridge. At the back, the captain clenched his fists. His troop was outside, but he knew the real battle was on that table. No gunpowder, only precision and control. An assistant dropped a piece of gauze. The soft thud on the canvas floor felt too loud and made everyone flinch. No one scolded him, but Lucia's eyes said everything. Total focus. The assistant picked it up and returned to his place with stiff fingers. Time seemed to slow. Outside, the wind rattled the tents. Some soldiers stared at the ground, praying in silence. Others kept their eyes on the tent, as if they could send strength through the fabric. The held breath of a whole platoon blended with the racing pulse of a young man with a grenade lodged beside his heart. The chief doctor spoke, voice dry. "Are we ready for the first move?" Lucia met his gaze. "You're never ready, but we're prepared." The captain took one step forward and set a hand on the edge of the side table. His face showed a man who understood the size of the risk. Outside, someone coughed and a sergeant nudged him right away. Silence. The military discipline that's measured in fire on the field was now measured in choked breaths inside the tent. The soldier started moving the fingers of his left hand, searching the air. Lucia placed her hand on his. She didn't say heroic words. She said what was needed. "I'm here. That gesture ran through the room like a wire lighting up. The tension remained, yes, but now it had a rhythm. The troops outside, the medics inside, all in one shared pulse. Resist fear, don't let it take the scene. Eyes returned to Mateo's chest. The metal was still there, still and deadly, breathing beside a heart that could not stop. The next step was close, but for now the entire field hospital balanced on an impossible edge. The life of one against the silence of many. Lucia pulled on her gloves as if that simple act could seal a pact with everyone in the room. The material gave a small crackle, and that sound became the starting signal. No one spoke. The chief doctor looked at her, but no orders were needed. Everyone knew she had to hold the calm on the thinnest line between life and death. In front of her, Mateo struggled to breathe. Each inhale a reminder that a heart was beating beside a device that could turn the tent to ashes. The monitor showed 120 beats per minute. Too fast, like a runaway horse. Lucia didn't look away from him. Her left hand went to his shoulder, and with her right she prepped the area, cleaning in steady, circular motions without a pause. The antiseptic-soaked cotton left a dark sheen under the light. She knew every second mattered. But she also knew haste could kill. The discipline she'd built over years of service came down to one rule. When reality shakes, your hands can't. Even though fear was tightening inside her, her fingers obeyed another will. Steady, almost mechanical. An assistant held out a clamp. Metal chimed, and Lucia took it gently, like lifting a glass. She passed it to the chief doctor, who prepared the first tiny incision around the wound. The air was so dense that even the captain, stiff in the corner, seemed to be holding his breath. Outside, the soldiers kept a silent watch, throats dry. The scalpel touched Mateo's skin. He shut his eyes and clenched his teeth. Lucia tipped the lamp, fixing the beam on the entry point. Uncertain fate ran through everyone, but her hands kept their sure rhythm. Clean, hold, absorb, point. Her movements were silent orders that steadied the rest of the team. Suddenly the monitor spiked. The faster beeps tightened every back and shoulder. The doctor raised his voice. "O2 sats now!" Lucia was already there. She adjusted the oxygen mask, checked the airflow, pressed the cannula lightly. The monitor eased down a few points. She didn't celebrate. She just murmured, loud enough for Mateo. "Easy. You're not alone." Sweat ran down her forehead, but she didn't lift a hand to wipe it. She couldn't lose contact with the field for even a second. Fate's tremor could slip in anywhere. In a snapped suture, in a glove brushing the wrong piece of metal. Every choice was a blade's edge, and on that edge walked the life of a kid no older than 22. "Retractors," the chief doctor said. Lucia handed them over in order, one by one, making sure nothing struck anything else. The device came into clearer view. A metal curve, rough along some edges, lodged far too close to a heart pounding in panic. A deeper silence fell, the kind that feels heavy enough to crush lungs. She kept her gaze steady. She knew that if she showed doubt, it would spread. Her face didn't twitch, her lips didn't press tight. Only her eyes showed the strain, and she hid it with focus. Her job wasn't just to assist. It was to hold up the invisible spine that kept the room from collapsing. Mateo mumbled, half dreaming, "Is it over?" Lucia bent just enough. "Not yet, hang in. Your hands are here. Your heart is here. That's what matters." The doctor glanced at her. Not technical words, but as necessary as a scalpel or a clamp. Keeping the patient present and centered could be the difference. The wall clock crept forward, each tick-tock a threat. Lucia didn't look at it. She followed a different time. The time of hands that must not fail. With each move, she proved what everyone already felt. In the middle of war, the only force against chaos was the steadiness of a nurse who didn't shake when everything else was ready to. The air in the tent had turned into a clock with no hands. No one checked the time, but everyone felt each second weigh more than the last. Mateo's body wasn't just a patient. It was a live bomb, proof that the war had found a way onto the operating table. Every breath he took was a wrong move that could end it all. The chief doctor lifted the scalpel and hesitated for a heartbeat. Not because he didn't know what to do, but because he knew what was at stake. Lucia, meanwhile, didn't hesitate to hold the lamp steady. Her firm hands told him he could proceed. That silent trust was the spark that kept the team together on the thin line between life and disaster. "Absorb," the doctor said. Lucia placed the gauze in the exact spot. No wavering. She knew the pressure had to be minimal, just enough to clear extra blood without shifting the object inside. Her movements were measured to the millimeter, as if a single fiber of fabric could set off the impossible. The monitor showed 115 beats per minute. A sharp, steady beep. An unrelenting metronome. Outside, the soldiers kept their post. No one dared speak, but the echo of their racing hearts seemed to pass through the canvas. The captain, motionless in the corner, clenched his jaw. The tension of his whole platoon hung on what happened at that table. Lucia thought of something her mentor always said. "Time doesn't exist. Order does. Follow it, you win seconds. Break it, you lose them all." She held on to that as she passed the retractors, set the tools, and watched the incision widen just enough to reveal the metal truth inside Mateo's chest. When the curve of the device came partly into view, an involuntary murmur ran through the team. It was real. There was no doubt now. A grenade sat beside the heart, so close it seemed to beat with it. The chief doctor lowered his voice, as if the air itself could wake the device. "If the grip fails, there won't be a second chance." Lucia nodded without speaking. Her fingers were already ready, holding fine clamps, moving with the patience of someone who knows nothing can be forced. Every second mattered. Everyone knew it. But what made the difference was acting as if each second were endless. Mateo groaned. Not a cry, just a low sound, almost a sob. Lucia took his hand, a gentle squeeze. "Stay with me. Breathe. Count silently if you can't talk." He gave a weak nod. His cold fingers found hers. The contact brought a hint of color back to his skin. He held on to that one small certainty. Someone was with him in the middle of absolute fear. The monitor sped up again. Pressure dipped a point. Without waiting for an order, Lucia adjusted the flow. The coordination was automatic. Years of training. The doctor glanced at her with a mix of respect and relief. He knew that without this nurse, the line between success and disaster would have blurred long ago. "Curved clamp," he said. Lucia passed it over without taking her eyes off the field. The edges of the grenade grew clearer, showing flecks of rust. Signs the metal wasn't new, that it had touched earth mud, the war itself. The heart, centimeters away, kept pounding unevenly, pushing blood and fear at the same time. Then the generator dipped, and the lights flickered. Everyone held their breath. 1 second of partial darkness. 1 second when everything hung by an invisible thread. Lucia didn't lose control. She grabbed the emergency flashlight, clicked it on, and held it with her shoulder while her hands kept working. The tremor running through the room never reached her fingers. The captain took a step forward, but she stopped him with a look. They didn't need more bodies at the table. They needed less fear. He stepped back, understanding the battle was being fought in silence. Each minute was a brick in a bridge they were all crossing together. If one fell, they all would. Lucia knew it, and that's why she refused to rush. Her calm became the metronome that replaced time. Outside, the platoon held its breath. Inside, Mateo's body was a minefield no one could walk away from. The whole room was a knot of held breaths. The metal shone under the flickering light, its outline buried beside Mateo's heart. No one needed to say the obvious. This was a complete device, not a stray fragment. It had crossed his body like a messenger of chaos and stopped in the worst possible place. Every beep of the monitor was a silent countdown. The chief doctor straightened slightly, eyes fixed on the wound. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His lips moved without sound before he dared to speak. If we leave it, he'll die in minutes or hours. If we try to remove it, we could all die now. The words fell heavy. In the corner, the captain clenched his teeth. Outside, the platoon waited. They couldn't hear the talk, but they felt the weight of the choice in the air slipping through the seams of the canvas. Lucia broke the silence first. Her voice didn't shake. The question isn't whether to risk it or not. We're already risking it by keeping him alive. The question is whether we'll fight so that risk means something. The doctor looked at her. His eyes held fatigue, but also recognition. It was true. Keeping Matteo like this was like holding a lit fuse. The war outside was brutal, but if that grenade blew here, it wouldn't just take the soldier. It could take doctors, nurses, officers, maybe the whole platoon guarding the tent. The captain stepped forward. If you decide to extract it, my men will back you. No one comes in or out without permission. If it fails, at least you tried. Lucia tightened her grip on the clamps. Her heart pounded as hard as Matteo's, but she didn't let it rule her. Every second that passes, the metal sinks deeper with movement. There's no time for reinforcements or transfer. We do it here. We do it now. The assistants swallowed hard. The youngest tried to speak, but Lucia's steady look stopped him. She wasn't after heroics. She was after clarity. She knew uncertainty was more dangerous than the device itself. The chief doctor finally nodded. All right, we proceed, but with watchmaker precision. No one moves without an order. No improvising. Lucia adjusted the lamp, took a deep breath, and spoke to Matteo. Listen to me. We're with you. You'll feel your air catch, but don't let go. Count in your head if you need to. You're not alone. The young soldier met her gaze with glassy eyes. Are you going to take it out? Yes, she said, plain and clear. And we're doing it together. Silence returned, but it felt different now. No longer the silence of paralyzing fear. This was the silence of a decision made. A silence like a blade's edge. Firm, unavoidable. The doctor held out his hand. Scalpel. Lucia set it in his palm. The sound of steel crossing skin was soft as a sigh, but everyone felt it like thunder. The incision widened a little more, just enough for controlled access. The air filled with the smell of iron and disinfectant. Matteo's heart beat like a racing drum that echoed in the ribs of everyone present. Every eye locked on the open chest. No one thought of anything else. Outside, the platoon stood frozen. Statues holding loaded rifles against an invisible enemy. At the table's edge, the captain dipped his head. For him, for all of us, he murmured. The chief doctor leaned closer, sweating. Precision clamp. Lucia passed it with exact movements. Her fingers didn't stray by even a millimeter. She was the straight line in a shaking world. Each step moved with her measured breathing, her calm pushing back the chaos. One assistant whispered a prayer. Another squeezed his eyes shut. No one hushed them. Everyone understood that each person needed their own way to hold steady. The snip of scissors, the brush of gauze, the monitor's beep. Together they formed a symphony of tension where every second weighed as much as a life. Lucia kept her voice low and steady. We're here, one step at a time. And so, without applause or speeches, the team chose to risk everything. A soldier on the table, a silent platoon outside, and a nurse holding fate's tremor with steady hands. The war shrank to that instant. A wager for life against the shadow of death. The moment of decision was over. Only action remained. The whole tent seemed to hold its breath, as if the air itself was afraid to brush against the object lodged in the soldier's chest. No one spoke. Not even the captain, used to giving firm orders, dared say a word. The silence was thick, absolute, so intense that even the generator's steady hum felt far away. Lucia held the metal tray with the instruments lined up. The chief doctor reached out, and she placed a fine clamp in his hand, careful not to let metal tap against anything. Even that tiny sound felt like an echo running through everyone there. All eyes fixed on a single point, the open wound, where the gray curve of the device rested far too close to a heart fighting not to stop. With half-open eyes, Matteo breathed unevenly. Each rise of his chest seemed to push the grenade against the muscle fibers around it. Without looking away, Lucia murmured slowly, "Stay with me. Breathe like I showed you." 1, 2, 2. He obeyed weakly, and that was enough to keep the team in rhythm. The monitor beeped in tight intervals, a reminder that life hung by a thin thread. The scalpel slid to widen the access just a touch. The skin gave under the lightest pressure, revealing more of the metal outline. It was compact, with rough edges and a surface still packed with dirt. The war had entered Matteo's body and anchored itself beside the engine of his life. An assistant spoke up without meaning to, barely a whisper. "It looks intact." Lucia shot him a steady look, and he fell silent. There was no room for comments. Every word was a risk. Every needless vibration an enemy. The chief doctor brought the clamp toward a visible edge. The metal flashed under the lamp, and for a second everyone thought they'd hear a fatal click. But nothing happened. The silence still ruled, relentless. With soft, careful motions, Lucia wicked away the blood without adding pressure. The gauze turned red, but her pulse stayed steady. In the corner, the captain closed his eyes for a moment. Outside, the platoon waited in absolute stillness. No one moved, no one coughed, no one cleared a throat. It was as if the whole camp had learned to breathe to the same beat as the man on the table. The doctor spoke in a thread of voice. "I'm going to set the first hold. If it shifts, that's the end." Lucia nodded and adjusted the lamp. Her hands were steady, her gaze clear. Fate's tremor never reached her fingers. The instrument touched the edge of the object, and time stopped for a heartbeat. The monitor's tone stretched into a long beep, cold enough to freeze the room. Matteo's breathing weakened. Lucia reacted at once. She adjusted the oxygen, gently massaged the side of his chest, and the monitor fell back into its uneven but stable rhythm. No one celebrated. They just kept going. The silence grew deeper still, as if each person understood there would be no second chance. The device was almost free now. You could see how the tissues hugged it, how the muscle had tried to shape itself around the impossible. It was life and death sharing one space, fighting for ground. The doctor worked slowly, and Lucia matched his pace without delay. Their teamwork was so precise it felt rehearsed, though they both knew nothing could truly prepare you for this. The wall clock ticked minutes, but for everyone it felt like hours. The scalpel slid again, freeing one side of the device. Lucia blotted the blood and set a second clamp to hold the field open. Everything moved to a silent music, each gesture a note, each breath a far drum. Barely conscious, Matteo murmured, "Is it done?" Without stopping her work, Lucia leaned close. "Not yet, but don't let go. We're close." He squeezed her fingers weakly. That small act ran through the room like a spark of hope. The chief doctor withdrew the clamp and changed his angle. The metal gave a little more. Part of the device lay free, bright and deadly. The tension doubled. No one moved. No one breathed hard. Absolute silence was the only shield they had. In that instant, Lucia understood something. Beyond the tools and the technique, what held Matteo's life together was an invisible pact of silence and focus. The world outside could roar with war, but inside the tent the universe had shrunk to a single bright, lethal point. One breath away from deciding everyone's fate. The metal edge was free on one side, shining under the light like a tooth that didn't belong to a human body. Everyone in the room knew this was the point of no return. The scalpel rested off to the side. Now the main tool was the clamp that had to grip the impossible without triggering the unthinkable. No one breathed normally. Every chest in the tent rose only a little, careful not to disturb the air. The chief doctor held out his hand. Lucia passed him a holding clamp, offering it with such care it felt like a sacred relic. Her fingers didn't shake. The choice was already made. The extraction had to happen now. Waiting even a minute more was inviting death by bleeding or by explosion. The monitor showed 110 beats per minute. Fast but steady. Matteo's heart was a scared drum, still fighting. He opened his eyes just enough to see the faces leaning over him. He didn't grasp the details, but he understood the weight of it. His voice was barely a thread. "Am I going to make it?" Without lifting her hands from the table, Lucia dipped her head. "Yes. Focus on your breath. 1, 2, 1, 2. The doctor brought the clamp to the device. The metal flashed coldly. It was as if the whole tent tightened, waiting for a fatal click that never came. In the corner, the captain pressed his fist to his thigh. Outside, the platoon stayed still, a wall of silence. With delicate motion, Lucia wicked away the blood, clearing the field. More of the metal surface appeared, still crusted with dirt, a reminder it was never meant to be there, much less to live beside a heart. The doctor took a deep breath. "I'm going to grip it. Keep the field steady." The clamp touched the edge. For a second it felt like the universe held its breath with them. The faint metallic contact sounded like thunder. The monitor's beep stretched longer, his heart slowing. "Don't let go," Lucia said firmly, more command than suggestion. The doctor tightened his grip and pulled the smallest amount. The device gave a millimeter, only a millimeter, but enough to open the wound further and start the blood flowing. Lucia moved at once, laying gauze without adding pressure. Her motions were exact, as if following an invisible map only she could see. A sharp tone from the monitor. 95 beats. Matteo's breathing weakened. Lucia set a hand on his shoulder. "Stay here. Don't drift. We're with you." He answered by squeezing her fingers. Weak, but a yes. The doctor pulled again. The grenade shifted slightly, freeing another edge. A ripple ran through the tent. Not physical, but emotional. Everyone was ready to run, even knowing running would be useless. The captain closed his eyes, as if trusting his life to someone else's heartbeat. "More gauze," the doctor said. Lucia handed it over without taking her eyes off the field. The metal was almost free now, but its closeness to the heart meant any rough move could tear vital muscle. Sweat slid down foreheads and into masks. The monitor dipped to 88. Matteo gasped. Lucia adjusted the oxygen mask, tightened the valve, raised the flow. The beeps climbed back, slowly. "That's it, Matteo. Breathe with me." The doctor leaned closer. The main clamp held the device from a new angle. With a movement so slow it felt endless, he pulled. The metal slid out 2 more millimeters. Now it was clear. A small grenade, impossibly embedded, hugging the life it meant to destroy. Time seemed to stop. Matteo's heart fell into a terrifying quiet. The monitor drew a flat line for a second that weighed like an eternity. Everyone froze. The air cut out. Lucia didn't hesitate. She grabbed the manual paddles, ready for the worst, and moved to his chest. Before she used them, the monitor chirped. The heart kicked back, irregular but alive. The team let out a held breath, relief that didn't turn into distraction. The doctor pulled once more, and the device came almost all the way out. Only a small piece held it to the body. Lucia blotted the blood, stabilized the area, and held the edge firm so it wouldn't slip back in. "Last move," the doctor whispered. Lucia nodded. Everyone bowed their heads as if in a ritual. The doctor applied exact pressure, and the grenade came free, still caught in the clamp. It dropped into the metal tray with a dry crack that cut through the room like a gunshot. Matteo's heart thumped hard. The monitor came back to life, wild but stable. No one spoke. No one clapped. The silence stayed absolute, but now it was full of awe. The grenade lay in the tray, still lethal, soaked in blood. Matteo's body was still alive. The impossible instant had happened. Life and death shared the same second, and the balance tipped toward life. Before we continue with this story full of tension and emotion, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a thumbs up. Your support helps us keep sharing stories as intense as this one. Sparkles, thank you for being here. And now, let's continue. The dry clang of metal on the tray still rang in everyone's ears. It was a small sound, loaded with meaning. The impossible had been done. The grenade, slick with fresh blood, lay motionless on the steel. For the first time in hours, the air in the tent didn't smell only of tension and sweat. It carried something like relief. Matteo let out a weak groan. His chest rose with effort, but without the deadly lump that had been pressing on it. The monitor found a steadier rhythm, still fast but recognizable as life. The assistant's shoulders dropped a little, as if they suddenly remembered they were allowed to breathe normally. Lucia didn't smile, but her eyes held a spark of triumph. She wasn't celebrating for herself or the team. She was celebrating the fact that a young heart was still beating. She leaned in, removed the soaked gauze, and replaced it with fresh pads. Her hands stayed steady. She knew extraction was only the first step. Now came suturing, bleeding control, and stabilization. She couldn't let her guard down. Exhausted, the chief doctor lowered his shoulders and murmured, "It's out. We did it." At the back, the captain closed his eyes for a moment in silent thanks. Then he looked at the tray. It was a beaten enemy, but not a dead one. No one dared get too close. Its mere presence reminded them it was still lethal. Outside, a soldier tried to peek in, but the warrant officer stopped him with a sharp gesture. The unit had to wait. The captain stepped out and raised a hand. The men understood without words. The patient was alive. A soft, contained murmur moved down the line. No cheers, no loud celebration. It was a quiet victory. Any noise could be misread by the war still rumbling in the distance. Lucia kept working. With needle and thread, she closed the wound in layers, careful, patient. Each stitch was a reminder that saving a life isn't just about removing danger. It's also about rebuilding what's been torn. Half conscious, the soldier mumbled something she couldn't catch. She bent closer. "Rest. It's not inside anymore. Breathe easy." Her words seemed to calm him. Matteo's body eased enough for the monitor to settle into a more even rhythm. The doctor met her eyes and nodded, knowing it was she, more than anyone, who had held the line in the critical moment. On the tray, the grenade shone under the light, smeared with both fresh and dried blood. The assistant stared with fear and fascination. It was a symbol. It had entered the tent as the embodiment of death. Now it lay inert, mastered by human will. But no one fooled themselves. A wrong move could still set it off. So it stayed there untouched, waiting for someone to decide what to do with it. Lucia finished the last layer of sutures and set a clean dressing. She passed her hand over it, as she always did, feeling the warmth and the pulse beneath. It was her way of confirming life was still there. She needed nothing more. The chief doctor spoke quietly. Patient stabilized. Continuous monitoring. Prep transfer as soon as it's safe. The captain came back in, eyes fixed on the device on the tray. He took a step closer and asked, "Is it disarmed?" The doctor shook his head. "We don't know. We only know it's no longer inside his body." Silence returned for a moment. Everyone understood what wasn't said. The danger wasn't over. But there was a real victory. A proof that even in chaos, life can win. Drained but calm, Lucia allowed herself 1 second of rest. She leaned on the side table and closed her eyes, listening to the monitor's steady beep. She wasn't thinking about the grenade, the soldiers outside, or the war beyond the canvas. She was thinking only of that sound confirming Matteo was still here. That was her victory, and it was enough. Outside, wind rattled the tents. Inside, the first victory was won. The soldier was breathing, the grenade lay far from his heart, and a nurse had proved that even the impossible can be done with steady hands and resolve. The steady beep of the monitor was the sign that Matteo had survived the impossible moment. The assistants, exhausted and sweating, looked at each other. The youngest of them let out a nervous clap, brief, like a spring that had finally released. A second, then a third hand joined in. It wasn't a loud, triumphant cheer. It was more like a collective sigh finally given voice. For a few seconds, the sound meant relief. They did it. The soldier was breathing. The nurse had held him. Death had been held back. But the clapping died quickly. The captain's look stopped it cold, like a silent order through the tent. "We haven't won anything yet." The danger still sat there on the metal tray, resting like a sleeping animal that could wake. The grenade wasn't disarmed. There was no EOD expert present, and no one in the room had special training to handle something like this. The chief doctor, voice rough, was the first to say what everyone was thinking. "So what do we do with this now?" Silence fell again. The applause turned into fear. The prickly feeling down your spine when you realize the danger hasn't gone away. It just changed place. The grenade was still a deadly guest. Only now it was outside the body. The relief of saving the soldier mixed with the shadow of a threat that still had no clear exit. Lucia stared at the device without looking away. Blood covered parts of it, but its shape was unmistakable. A compact metal body, worn edges, traces of dirt. The war had left a direct reminder of what it could do. She said nothing. She knew talking too much could break the fragile calm holding the room together. The captain crossed his arms and looked around. "We can't leave it here. Not near the patient, not near the team." One assistant, still with blood on his hands, murmured, "If we touch it wrong, it could." The captain cut him off sharply. "We know that." The fear was so real that no one dared move the tray. Just imagining it falling to the floor was enough to give everyone cold sweat at the nape of the neck. Outside, the platoon waited impatiently. They didn't know the details, but the tension coming from the tent unsettled them. The chief doctor took a long breath. "We can isolate it in a container, something stable, away from vibration." Lucia heard him and considered it. It made sense, but any move was a gamble. She looked at the face of the soldier they had just saved. He slept under light sedation, his skin still pale but breathing. She understood that one wrong choice now could erase everything they'd achieved in seconds. An assistant pointed to the metal box where spare scalpels were kept. "We could use that. It's sturdy with a tight latch." The captain hesitated, then nodded. "Better than leaving it out." Lucia stepped up without asking. With slow, careful movements, she went to the tray. Everyone held their breath. She took the box, opened it silently, and set it beside the tray. Then, with a long clamp, she gripped the device at a visible edge. Her fingers did not shake, even though the weight of the moment pressed on her shoulders. The metal lifted a few centimeters. Not a single person blinked. The clamp scraping the tray sounded loud in their heads, almost like a shout. Lucia placed the object inside the box, closed the lid carefully, and turned the lock until she heard a dull click. Only then did everyone breathe out. The room exhaled together. The captain stepped forward, took the box with both hands, and held it against his chest as if it were a moral weight, not just a physical one. "This doesn't leave here without my orders," he said, voice grave. No one answered. Fear remained, but now it took the form of disciplined silence. The grenade was contained, but the question stayed. What do we do with it next? Lucia moved back and checked Matteo again. She adjusted the dressing, checked the 4-drip, and watched his oxygen saturation. She wasn't trying to distract herself. She was reminding herself the patient was still the priority. Meanwhile, the rest of the team kept glancing toward the metal box in the captain's hands. It was as if everyone's heart still beat in that container. They had won the first battle, yes, but a second fight began now, deciding the fate of the object that could take them all down in an instant. The captain didn't take long to leave the tent, holding the metal box with the grenade tight to his chest. Outside, the air was cold, but tension made it heavy. The platoon watched in silence. No one asked questions, though everyone knew he wasn't carrying a simple container. His boots thudded on the wet ground as he headed for the improvised command post, a truck with antennas stabbing the sky like needles. Inside the vehicle, the light was dim, lit by portable lamps. Higher-ranking officers waited with hard faces. The captain set the box on a table and reported in a firm voice. He explained how the device had been pulled from a living soldier's chest, how the nurse kept everyone calm, and how the object could still be lethal if mishandled. The superiors looked at each other. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the radio's static. One of them, a colonel with a severe stare, spoke first. "This doesn't leave this room." The captain frowned. "With respect, sir, the troops outside already suspect, and the medical team lived it firsthand." The colonel slapped the table with an open palm. "Suspicion isn't proof. If word spreads, fear will move like wildfire. The men will stop trusting the hospital as a safe place. And if the enemy learns they got a device into one of our men's hearts, they'll try again." Silence fell again, heavier than before. The captain understood what those words meant. Hide the truth. Lucia's and the team's sacrifice would be buried under orders. The grenade would be labeled recovered enemy material, and nothing more. Back in the tent, Lucia finished checking Matteo's dressing. His breathing was weak but steady. The assistants packed instruments with automatic, jittery motions. The chief doctor stepped out to wash his face, and when he returned, an officer with a stone-cold expression was with him. "Direct order from high command," the officer said flatly. "What happened here won't be reported as an extraordinary medical intervention. It will be classified as a controlled incident." One young nurse couldn't hold back. "How can we keep quiet about this? We pulled a grenade from a living heart." The officer stared him down. "You'll keep quiet because it's an order." Lucia lifted her head. Her eyes met the officer's. No fear, no open defiance. "And the soldier?" she asked. "Will he also be reduced to a nameless report?" The man hesitated before answering. "The soldier will be transferred as a stable casualty." The rest didn't happen. The chief doctor closed his eyes for a moment. He knew arguing was useless. The chain of command reached even into a healing tent. Lucia said nothing more. She put her thoughts behind a controlled silence. Her duty was to keep Matteo alive, not fight a political battle already lost in that moment. Outside, the captain returned to the tent with a hardened face. He'd received the order and had to deliver it. As he entered, he felt every eye on him. "High Command has decided," he said gravely. "None of this is to be discussed. Not with other soldiers, not with families, not in reports. It's classified." The assistants lowered their heads. Some clenched their fists. Others bit their lips. The silence became a shared sentence. They had witnessed a medical miracle, and yet they were forbidden to speak. Lucia took a long breath, adjusted Mateo's fore, and whispered, more to herself than to the others, "At least he's alive. They can't erase that." The captain heard her, but didn't answer. Outside, the radio kept sending scattered orders, the echo of a war that didn't stop. Inside the tent, a secret was born, one that would weigh on each of them more than any uniform or rank. Orders for silence were given in a strict, military tone, sharp as knives. But in a war camp, words are harder to control than smoke. A single gesture, a half-hidden whisper, or one look too long was enough for the truth to find invisible paths. And so it happened. The first whisper came from the guard line. A stretcher-bearer, still pale, spoke softly. "You don't know what they took out of that boy." His partner quickly cut him off, afraid. "Shut up, that's an order." But the damage was done. Even half a sentence was enough to set imagination on fire. That night, while soldiers took turns warming their hands by small fires, rumors spread. They say he had something strange in his chest. It wasn't normal shrapnel. The nurse pulled it out with her bare hands. No one knew the full truth, but each version added a new spark. Some said it was an unexploded bullet. Others claimed it was a piece so big it looked like a whole device. The more they were told not to talk, the more curiosity grew. Fear slipped into the night talks. Some looked at their bulletproof vests as if they were made of paper. If one of us carried that inside without knowing, any of us could be next. Distrust spread like dry grass burning in the wind. In the medical tent, Lucia noticed. Each time a soldier came for a small treatment, his eyes moved nervously, searching for clues. No one dared ask her directly, but everyone wanted confirmation. She stayed calm, answering only what was needed. Clean wound. 3 days rest. Stitches stable. Nothing more. She knew one wrong word could confirm the rumor. The captain noticed too. At morning roll call, his orders were harder, his voice sharper. He repeated again and again that nothing unusual had happened, that the hospital was safe. But the stiff rows of soldiers hid whispers in every breath. Discipline could not cover fear. Some began to invent theories. It was a new enemy weapon. They're testing explosives that stay inside the body. Others, more superstitious, spoke of curses. The boy carried death in his chest, and now death walks free in the camp. Each version added more unease. Lucia, tired after long hours on duty, overheard 2 soldiers at the tent entrance. They say the box is still here. They say it beats on its own at night. The nurse clenched her jaw, holding back her reply. She knew fighting rumors was useless. Silence was her only tool. But silence was also fuel for imagination. Meanwhile, Mateo rested under light sedation. His breathing was steadier, though fever still chased him like a shadow. He didn't know that outside his name had become legend, making him the unwilling hero of a growing myth. The chief doctor tried to stop the rumors with a short announcement. "The soldier is recovering. There is nothing unusual." But those words, said too carefully, were taken as proof of the opposite. Soldiers looked at each other, and the rumors only grew. Soon, the entire camp was whispering. Each corner had its own version, and though details differed, they all shared the same idea. Something had happened that the officers wanted to hide. And if command stayed silent, it had to be worse than they imagined. Lucia went back to her corner and wrote on a scrap of paper, just for herself. "A man's life was saved, but silence is creating a monster bigger than the truth." She folded the note into her pocket and returned to her work. There were bandages to change, IVs to check, and a young soldier who needed constant care. Meanwhile, across the camp, voices multiplied. The rumor was no longer a secret. It was a fire burning in the dry grass of uncertainty, and the wind of war carried it further every moment. The sun had risen many times since the operation. The camp kept its rough routine of marches, guards, and gunfire in the distance, but inside the medical tent, time moved at a different pace. Matteo, the soldier who had slept with death in his chest, began to open his eyes after days of light sedation. His breathing was steadier, though still heavy, as if he carried an invisible weight. Lucia was the first to notice the change. She had learned to see the difference between a fever dream and true awakening. She came closer to the cot and said softly, "Welcome back, Matteo." The young man blinked several times. His lips were dry, and he barely managed to whisper, "Am I still here?" "Yes, you are." Lucia wet a piece of gauze and gently touched it to his lips. "Breathe easy." Matteo obeyed. His eyes searched the ceiling of the tent, as if trying to remember where he was. Slowly, his memory returned. The explosion, the pain in his chest, the darkness that had wrapped around him. When he tried to move his right hand, he noticed the thick bandage near his sternum. His body told him what his mind could not put into words. He had survived something that should have been impossible. The chief doctor entered and checked his vital signs. Stable pressure, good oxygen levels. He's out of immediate danger. Then he looked at Lucia. "A lot of this is thanks to you." She didn't answer. Praise felt unnecessary. Her focus stayed on the patient, who was watching her with a mix of gratitude and confusion. "What exactly happened?" Matteo asked, his voice barely audible. Lucia thought for a moment. She couldn't tell the whole truth, not with the command's orders hanging over them. She chose words that were true, but not the full story. "We took something out of you that didn't belong there. And we succeeded." Matteo closed his eyes. A tear escaped, though no one knew if it was from relief or pain. "Thank you," he whispered. "I thought I would never see anything again." Lucia squeezed his hand gently. "You're alive. Focus on that." But as he tried to sleep again, his face showed a shadow that would not leave. It was not just tiredness. It was as if he had woken with a dark feeling he couldn't explain. That same afternoon, some soldiers came to visit him. They left a canteen with fresh water, a piece of bread, and nervous greetings. They didn't say much, but their eyes betrayed them. They knew he had been at the center of something everyone whispered about. Matteo felt their gaze, as if he was a man who had survived the impossible. When he was alone, he called for Lucia with a rough voice. "Them? What do they think happened?" "Rumors," she answered coldly. "Don't pay attention." Matteo lowered his eyes. He understood there was more, something no one dared to tell him. He didn't push, but unease settled in his chest, as heavy as the scar that now ached under the bandage. The following days were slow recovery. He walked a few steps inside the tent with help from 2 comrades, then returned exhausted to his cot. Every movement reminded him of his body's weakness. Every breath reminded him how close he had come to disappearing. He was thankful to be alive, yes, but at night, when he closed his eyes, he dreamed of the metallic sound of an object dropping onto a tray. Lucia watched closely. She knew how to recognize when a patient carried more than physical wounds. Matteo woke up startled, sweating, his hand reaching for his chest, as if he feared to find the lump still there. He didn't talk about it, but his silence spoke louder than words. The captain visited one morning. His voice was firm. "You are a lucky soldier. Rest and recover. That's all you need to know." Matteo nodded, but the shadow in his eyes grew darker. He was grateful to be alive, but he sensed his survival was not a simple matter. He knew, even without being told, that what had happened made him more than just a patient. He was a secret on 2 legs, a man marked not only by a scar, but by silence ordered from above. Lucia noticed too. And though she couldn't reveal the full truth, she understood that Mateo's life would never be the same. He had come back from the edge, yes, but he had brought with him the strange shadow of a memory that would never fully disappear. Nights in the camp were never truly silent. There was always some engine rumbling in the distance, a stray gunshot, footsteps on patrol, or the wind hitting the canvas. But for Lucia, since the operation, the real noise was inside. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mateo's chest open and the metallic shape beating beside his heart. The image was so sharp she could count the rough edges on the surface of the grenade, smell iron mixed with blood, and hear the fast beeping of the monitor as if she were still there. She lay on her cot after endless shifts, tired to the bone, but sleep avoided her. As soon as her eyelids closed, the frozen moment returned. The forceps reaching for the object, the tiny pull that freed it just a millimeter, the absolute silence that followed. She woke with the feeling the device was still inside, that they had never removed it, that it could still explode. Some comrades noticed she was more serious, more distant. They blamed the exhaustion of war, but Lucia knew it was something else. She had stayed calm when everyone shook. She had kept discipline when fate itself seemed to crack, but now alone, the image would not let her go. One dawn she stepped out of the tent for air. She walked to where the wind lifted dust and ash and sat on an empty crate. There, the memory struck harder. The heart and the metal beating together, as if they were one living thing. It was not natural. It was an impossible union she had seen too closely. And that closeness haunted her. She thought of Mateo, asleep under the medicine, and wondered if he too felt the same shadow in his dreams. Maybe in his memory the device was still inside him, reminding him that he had carried death within. Lucia rubbed her temples and sighed. She could not speak of it with anyone. Command had forbidden it, and the team had accepted it as a shared secret. The official silence was harder to carry than the long, exhausting days. She tried to distract herself with routine. She checked bandages again and again, lined up instruments by size and use, verified patients' IVs 3 times more than needed. It was her way of keeping control, of believing she could still bring order into chaos. But at the end of the day, the image returned. It always returned. The nurse, who had learned to lock fear in a mental box to keep working, now discovered that box was broken. The memory of a heart beating beside metal fit nowhere. It leaked through every crack, invading her moments of calm. One night, while trying to sleep, she listened to the breathing of the others in the shared tent. They were exhausted, sunk in deep sleep. She, instead, opened her eyes and looked at the canvas ceiling. She could swear she heard a metallic echo, a sharp sound repeating in her memory. The same noise the grenade made when it hit the tray. She sat up, trembling, and reached for water. The cup slipped from her hands. The noise woke a stretcher-bearer who, half asleep, asked, "Everything okay?" "Yes," she lied, quickly picking up the pieces. No one could know that the strength she had shown during the operation was cracking in the dark. It was her burden, her secret. Each time she checked on Mateo, the memory grew stronger. Seeing him breathe was a relief, but also a reminder. Watching him sleep, she thought, that heart was one step away from absolute silence, and she had witnessed life and death sharing the same space. Once, the captain caught her staring at the soldier's bandage. "He's safe now," he said. Lucia gave a small nod, but inside she knew it wasn't fully true. The body was safe, yes, but his mind, and hers, carried the mark. In war, the visible scars are honored with medals, but the invisible ones, the ones no one names, stay hidden in memory. And for Lucia, that scar was the vision of a heart beating beside metal, an image that would follow her long after the physical wounds had healed. The day after the operation began with a gray sun, barely visible through the smoke from the front. The camp woke as always, with boots hitting the ground, commanding voices, and pots of watery coffee giving energy. Outside, nothing seemed different. But inside the medical tent, calm was only a disguise. Lucia had spent the night awake, haunted by the image of heart and metal. At dawn, she forced herself to check Matteo with her usual routine. Blood pressure, oxygen, temperature. Everything looked normal, though unease slipped between the numbers. The soldier slept, but his face was tense, as if he fought in a heavy dream. Mild fever, the chief doctor murmured, writing on the chart. Nothing alarming. Lucia didn't answer. She leaned closer to the bandage. No new bleeding, but the skin around it looked more swollen than it should. A sign that didn't fit. She adjusted his pillow and went back to her table, though the feeling inside her kept growing. 6 hours after the procedure, Matteo opened his eyes in pain. "It burns," he whispered, reaching for his chest. Lucia stopped his hand before it touched the wound. "Easy. Breathe. I'll check." When she pulled back the bandage a little, she noticed a strange color in the skin. It wasn't a normal reaction. The redness was deep, uneven, as if something else was pushing from inside. She checked his pulse. Faster than expected. "Doctor," she called, eyes fixed on the wound. "Something's wrong." The chief doctor came closer and frowned. "Could be an early infection. Increase the antibiotics." Lucia obeyed, though it didn't feel like any infection she had seen before. This was different, like the body was reacting to more than just a wound. Hours passed. The camp kept its usual noise, but the tent grew heavier by the minute. Matteo began to sweat cold and twist in pain. The monitor showed sharp, irregular peaks in his heartbeat. The soldier clenched his teeth and muttered through groans. "It's like it's still inside me." Lucia shivered. The words matched the fear that had chased her all night. At 12 hours, the pain became unbearable. Matteo arched his back, crying out. The medics held him down. The chief doctor ordered stronger painkillers. The young man sank into restless sleep, but even then his body trembled, as if fighting an invisible enemy. Lucia went to the captain, who had returned to supervise. "Something's wrong," she said firmly. "What we took out wasn't everything." The captain gave her a hard look. "Don't start with speculations." Command was clear. "It ended there." "It hasn't ended," she insisted, her eyes on the soldier writhing on the cot. "His body says otherwise." The officer stayed silent, but the tightness in his jaw betrayed him. At 24 hours, the true danger showed itself. Matteo woke with a strangled cry and a violent spasm. His breathing stopped, and the monitor screamed with alarms. The doctor rushed to him, pulling at the bandage. Beneath the skin of his chest, small hard lumps had appeared, close to the wound. "Fragments," he whispered in disbelief. Lucia closed her eyes for a moment, confirming her fear. The device hadn't come alone. The surgery had removed the main grenade, yes, but fragments had stayed behind, hidden like seeds of a bigger disaster. The camp didn't know it yet, but the countdown had started again. The real danger hadn't ended on the tray. It was still inside the soldier, waiting for its moment. The discovery of the fragments changed the air in the field hospital. It was no longer the controlled tension of the ore, where every move follows a plan, but a diffuse unease that touched everyone. The chief doctor, his voice unsteady, confirmed it. "There are active pieces left inside his body." That sentence spread like an echo to the far corners of the tent. No one repeated it out loud, but everyone felt it. What had looked like a clean win was, in truth, an unfinished chapter. That same afternoon, in the storage area, the unexpected happened. While a few soldiers were moving boxes of ammo, a blast shook the camp. It wasn't an enemy attack, not a shell from outside. It was an internal detonation, brief but enough to kick up dust and screams. An old grenade, poorly secured in a drawer, went off while being handled. No one died, but there were injuries and a sudden fear. The noise reached the medical tent. Lucia jumped to her feet, thinking for a second that Matteo had exploded from the inside. Her heart pounded until it hurt. Only after the reports came in did she understand the blast was in the supply area. Even so, the link was impossible to avoid. In many minds, what happened in storage mixed with the rumors about the soldier. "It's a sign," they whispered. "First inside one of ours, now here." Fear multiplied. The captain came into the tent with his uniform dusty. "It wasn't here. It's under control. No one else talks about this," he said, as if he could patch a hole in the canvas during a storm with sheer force. But reality doesn't obey orders. Outside, soldiers were already talking about curses, hidden traps, invisible enemies. The rumor of a heart with metal inside mixed with a real explosion in camp. And together they made a story stronger than any official message. Half-conscious, Matteo caught bits of the whispers. In his haze, he mixed the operation's memories with the fresh shouts. With dry lips, he breathed out a thin question. "Was it me?" Lucia took his hand. "No, it wasn't you. Breathe. You're here." But he shut his eyes in distress. Guilt clung to him like the fever. He hadn't caused the blast in storage, yet in his mind the connection was unavoidable. He carried fragments inside that could do the same at any moment. The chief doctor gathered the team in a corner of the tent. "If those pieces are active, we can't wait. But opening him again here is too risky." Lucia met his eyes, steady. "Not doing it is the bigger risk. Every minute raises the chance that something inside reacts." The captain cut in. "We already had one explosion in camp. We can't allow another. If the troops start believing they've got a walking corpse among them, we'll lose discipline." His words were harsh, but real. The threat wasn't only medical, it was psychological too. In war, fear spreads faster than gunpowder. And a frightened unit is a unit close to collapse. Lucia returned to Matteo's cot. She watched him sleep, restless, his face tight. She touched the bandage and felt under her fingers the hard edges of the fragments still hidden. They hadn't gone off in surgery, they hadn't gone off in storage, but the danger still pulsed there, silent, waiting. That night, the camp fell asleep with the certainty that the war had entered twice. Once into their supplies, and once into the body of one of their own. And though the explosion hadn't happened in the ore, the threat lingered, unseen, more feared because it was impossible to predict. The night after the explosion in the storage area was long and heavy. The troops slept only halfway, some hugging their rifles, others staring into the dark with eyes wide open. In the medical tent, Matteo seemed to rest, but every so often he moved uneasily, as if fighting shadows no one else could see. Lucia stayed at his side, watching the monitors and listening closely to every change in his breathing. At dawn, the soldier woke with a muffled groan. He tried to sit up, but pain bent him to one side. "It burns," he whispered hoarsely, "like I've got coals inside." Lucia held him firmly. "Don't move. Let me check." She carefully pulled back part of the bandage. The wound was still closed, no clear signs of infection. Yet Matteo's chest showed a strange tension, as if something unseen was pushing from within. When she pressed lightly, he flinched in pain. It wasn't the normal pain of stitches. It was deeper, more irregular. "Feels like needles," he gasped. "Stabbing when I breathe." The chief doctor called at once, listened with his stethoscope. He caught odd sounds, metallic, mixed with a heartbeat. He frowned. It shouldn't sound like this. A chill ran down Lucia's back. This wasn't the soldier's imagination. There was something else, something the body was rejecting and the instruments couldn't ignore. For the rest of the day, the pain grew sharper. Matteo twisted on the cot, grinding his teeth to keep from crying out. Sometimes he managed to sleep a few minutes, but woke up startled, sweating, clutching his chest. "Not all of it came out," he said between gasps. "It's still there. I know it." Lucia tried to calm him, though each word echoed her own fear. She suspected the same thing, but kept her face steady. "Listen, Matteo. You're alive, and that's what matters. We're watching you every minute." But inside, her confidence cracked. His platoon mates began to notice the decline. When they came to visit, they saw his pale face and painful movements. Some avoided looking at him directly, as if his suffering might spread. Outside, the rumors grew louder. "It's still inside him." What they pulled out wasn't everything. The kid's a bomb waiting his turn. The captain tried to cut off the voices with discipline, but he knew he couldn't control what men felt when they saw Matteo. The image of the soldier who survived the impossible was now turning into another. The soldier who could drag them all down in his fall. By evening, Matteo had a spasm stronger than the others. The monitor screamed in alarm. The doctor rushed to him, checking the signs. Pressure dropping. Heartbeat unstable. Lucia held him, searching for his eyes. "Hold on. Look at me. You're here." He gripped her hand desperately. "No, it's not over. I feel it inside, moving." The chill in the tent was immediate. No one knew how to take those words. Fever-driven delirium, or a real intuition. The doctor stayed silent. So did Lucia. But in their silence, the same truth echoed. Something was still inside, something the scalpel hadn't reached. Night fell again, darker than the ones before. In the tent, every breath Matteo took came with a groan. Lucia never left his side, though inside she felt time itself was pushing toward an uncertain ending. The soldier was alive, yes, but also a prisoner of an unexplainable pain. Like his body still carried the metallic echo of the grenade. The early morning was a chain of alarms. Matteo's heart monitor sounded off in bursts, sharp peaks, sudden drops, pauses that made everyone in the tent hold their breath. Exhausted, Lucia kept her eyes open, watching every change. She couldn't shake the idea that something else was still hidden inside the soldier's body. At dawn, the chief doctor ordered a closer check. The field hospital didn't have advanced imaging, only an old, portable ultrasound. Still, it was all they had. Lucia set up the device while the doctor spread cold gel on Matteo's chest. The young man shivered at the touch, but said nothing. He was too weak. The screen showed blurry shadows. The doctor moved the probe again and again, searching for different angles. At first it looked like normal interference, but then something clearer appeared. Small hard shapes, uneven, lodged in the tissue near the heart. Bright points that didn't belong there. The doctor went quiet, his brow tight. Lucia understood immediately. This isn't infection. These are remains. He nodded gravely. Shrapnel fragments. And they look stable. But active. The word active fell heavy. It meant they weren't just harmless scraps of metal, but pieces still capable of reacting under certain conditions. No one knew how they'd been missed in the first surgery. Maybe buried too deep, maybe hidden in the rush to remove the main grenade. What mattered was that they had stayed inside, like a sleeping poison. Hearing part of the exchange, Matteo tried to sit up. "What does that mean?" Lucia held him down. "Easy, don't move." The doctor hesitated before answering. "It means there are still pieces inside you." The soldier shut his eyes. His breathing sped up. "I knew it. I feel it every time I breathe." The captain was called at once. He entered, looked at the blurred images, and listened to the explanation. His face grew harder. "Can you take them out?" The doctor slowly shook his head. "Not with this equipment. Not without a proper ore. They're too close to the heart. If we try here, it could end him right away." The silence in the tent grew unbearable. The captain realized they weren't just holding an injured man. They held a threat that could weigh on the whole camp. Outside, the rumors kept spreading, and this news only fed the worst fears. Lucia spoke, breaking the stillness. "We can't ignore it. If those fragments move, if they react, it'll be like starting all over. Or worse." The chief doctor looked at her with tired eyes. "I know, but we face two risks. Operate here with almost nothing, or wait for a transfer that may never come." Matteo lay listening with his eyes closed, clutching the sheet in his fists. His face was a mix of physical pain and dread. He felt like his body was a hidden battlefield, a place where the war kept going even when no shots were fired outside. The captain stepped out, walked a few paces in silence, then returned. "High Command must not know yet. If they find out, they'll declare him unfit and evacuate him as a risk. And we all know what that means. They won't treat him. They'll discard him." Lucia clenched her jaw. To stay silent again was to condemn the soldier. But she understood. In military logic, one man could be seen as more dangerous than the enemy. The doctor switched off the ultrasound and pulled the blanket over Matteo. The black screen felt like a symbol of their uncertainty. There were no clear answers. Only the unsettling discovery that what they thought was resolved had been nothing but an illusion. Lucia stayed at his side, watching the faint rise and fall of his chest. She thought of all those nights when she couldn't sleep because of the image of heart and metal, and she understood the nightmare wasn't over. Now the fragments were the new threat. They hadn't been seen before, but they had always been there, waiting. The news about the fragments didn't take long to leak, even though the captain had ordered silence. It was enough for a stretcher-bearer to catch a glimpse of the blurry ultrasound screen for the rumor to gain strength. First a murmur in the hallway, then a whisper among the guards, until it became an inevitable comment at every campfire. "The soldier still carries death in his chest." The chief doctor tried to impose reason with technical arguments. He gathered a small group and explained calmly. "Their shrapnel remains small pieces. Yes, they're close to the heart, but with constant monitoring it's possible to stabilize him until a safe transfer arrives. There's no reason to talk about spontaneous explosions." Some nodded, trusting his professional voice, but others, especially soldiers who had heard stories of hidden mines and handmade bombs, refused to accept that explanation. For them, Matteo's body wasn't just a recovering patient. It was a living trap. One afternoon, two soldiers argued at the entrance of the tent. "Science says it's under control. And what if science is wrong? Yesterday, a crate blew up in storage. Don't you see the connection?" Lucia heard them from inside. She pressed her lips, aware that this tension couldn't be solved with medical protocols alone. Superstition, fed by fear, spread among the men faster than any official report. Matteo, more aware of the whispers each day, began to feel like a stranger among his own. When they visited, they avoided touching him or stood in uncomfortable silence. One night, he confessed to Lucia in a low voice. "They think I carry a bomb inside me. And sometimes I think so too." She squeezed his hand. "You're not a bomb. You're a man who survived the impossible. That's who you are." But even as she spoke, doubt cut through her. She had seen the images, felt the hard shapes under her fingers on his chest. She couldn't deny the truth. Something was still there. The question was whether it was asleep or waiting to wake up. The clash between science and superstition even reached the medical staff. A young assistant whispered that maybe the enemy had designed grenades seeded with activatable fragments. Another insisted they were just metal scraps, nothing more. The debate grew heated until the chief doctor slammed the table. "Enough! We work with facts here, not legends." Lucia stayed quiet, but another voice echoed in her mind. What if science doesn't have all the answers this time? The captain tried to hold discipline, but he could see how the platoon's morale weakened. A unit that suspects one of its own is a unit close to breaking. He ordered visits to Matteo restricted, and only authorized staff allowed near him. That didn't stop the fear. On the contrary, it fed it. The restriction was taken as proof that something was being hidden. Meanwhile, Matteo's pain grew sharper. He curled on the cot, pressing his chest, convinced something inside was moving. His eyes filled with a childlike terror. "It's like it still breathes with me," he said, pointing to the wound. Lucia calmed him as best she could, repeating firm phrases, ordering him to count his breaths. But inside she understood the weight of the dilemma. What was more dangerous, the readings on the monitors or the fear spreading through everyone's minds? The entire camp seemed trapped between two truths. The scientific one, which said the body could be stabilized with care, and the superstitious one, which claimed a man carrying fragments was a corpse waiting to explode. Both lived side by side, in tension, like two opposing currents clashing under the same canvas roof. Lucia, sleepless, summed it up in her notebook. "I don't know what weighs more, the steel left in his chest or the fear spreading in the air." The rumor about the live fragments still inside Matteo's body was already enough to shake morale. But soon it took a darker turn. Among the soldiers, an unsettling question began to spread. What if it hadn't been an accident? What if that grenade in his chest wasn't chance, but placed there on purpose? One night, while some shared weak coffee near the fire, a corporal whispered, "No grenade goes in that clean, without tearing the body apart. Someone put it there. Who would do something like that?" Another asked, voice tight. The corporal lowered his tone. "A message, a warning to us, or to someone in particular." The idea caught like a spark in gunpowder. Men began watching each other with suspicion. Eyes that once scanned the enemy horizon now slid across their own ranks. No one said it openly, but the shadow of a traitor in their midst grew larger. In the medical tent, the tension was in the air. Weak as he was, Matteo felt it in the scarce visits and stiff gestures of his comrades. One afternoon, he asked Lucia in a rough voice, "Do you think someone tried to kill me like this?" She looked at him, weighing every word. "I think war is full of traps, but I won't let them destroy you, inside or out." It was the only truth she could offer without cutting deeper wounds. The captain called a private meeting with the chief doctor and Lucia. He shut the canvas door and spoke in a grave tone. "I've received reports from the troops. They suspect the grenade was intentional." The doctor rubbed his forehead. "Who could do it? Only a madman would try something like that." The captain cut him off. "Not a madman. Someone with a goal. The rumors say it wasn't against the soldier himself, but a message to the unit. And worse, some believe the message was aimed at you, nurse." A chill ran through Lucia. "At me?" The captain nodded. "You're the one who did what no one else could, pulled him out alive. Now they say someone wanted to test you, or warn you." Silence filled the tent. Lucia remembered every second of the surgery, every glance held back, every tremor in the hands of the others. It had been an attack on the soldier, yes, but the thought that someone had staged it with a personal purpose opened a new abyss. That night, while checking Matteo's for, Lucia felt the eyes of the troops piercing her even through the canvas walls. It was no longer just the marked soldier. Now she too was under suspicion. The soldier, his voice broken by fever, asked again, "What if it wasn't an accident? What if someone wanted to watch me burn from the inside?" Lucia didn't answer. She knew any word might sink him further. She stroked his forehead and soothed him back to sleep. But in her mind, the doubt had taken root. What if that grenade wasn't a battlefield accident, but a calculated warning? The soldiers spoke in lower voices each day, glancing sideways at their superiors. The captain tightened guard duty and banned movements without clearance. No one said it out loud, but the thought was there. The enemy could be outside, or among them. The field hospital, once a fragile shelter against the storm, now felt like a board full of suspicious pieces. And Lucia, who had held life itself in her hands, began to feel trapped in the sinister message someone had left inside a young man's chest. The rumor was no longer just a whisper. It had turned into an unspoken certainty. The grenade in Mateo's chest couldn't be explained as simple chance in war. The idea that someone had placed it there on purpose settled into every conversation, making the days feel heavier than the nights. The captain gathered the middle ranks in a separate tent. His voice was firm, but the tension in his eyes betrayed him. We have to face it. If this was intentional, someone here allowed it or carried it out. That makes this camp a place full of shadows. The sergeants exchanged uneasy looks. One of them asked the inevitable, "Are we talking about a traitor in our ranks?" Silence was the answer. No one wanted to say it, but everyone thought it. Meanwhile, in the field hospital, Lucia watched the soldiers move about, no longer trusting one another. The men who once volunteered to donate blood now hesitated. Some avoided eye contact, others whispered in the halls. It was as if every familiar face could be hiding an enemy. Mateo, weak but aware, felt the distrust. One afternoon, his voice barely audible, he told Lucia, "They don't see me as one of them anymore. They look at me like I'm carrying a secret that's going to destroy them." Lucia stroked his hand. "You're not guilty of anything. What they did to you was a betrayal, but not yours." Her words gave him a moment of relief, though the shadow lingered. The captain tightened discipline. He ordered surprise searches of backpacks, checks in the storage area, and strict control of access to the medical zone. Each inspection was met with hardened faces, a mix of obedience and contained anger. The army was built to fight an enemy outside, not to confront the suspicion that one of their own might be the hidden executioner. The chief doctor, worried, came to Lucia one night. "If we keep this up, paranoia will consume us faster than any enemy attack." She knew it. The real danger was no longer just the shrapnel inside Mateo's body, but the invisible fear eating away at trust. One disturbing detail increased the suspicion. During the searches, they found a supply box tampered with, bandages mixed with damp soil, as if someone had handled the contents far from camp. The captain showed it to the team. "There's no doubt. We have an infiltrator, or a traitor." That word rang out like a gunshot. Traitor. It was no longer just a rumor. It was now official. The soldiers began to split into small groups, trusting only those they had known before. Camaraderie fractured, and Lucia saw it even in the way they treated the wounded. A man with a bandaged leg refused another's help, muttering, "I don't know whose side you're on." The invisible enemy was meeting its goal, dividing them. Lucia, sitting beside Mateo, reflected in silence. Saving bodies wasn't enough if the heart of the camp was being poisoned with suspicion. More and more, it became clear that the grenade in the young man's chest hadn't just been an attempt to kill. It had been a calculated message meant to destabilize them from within. Suspicion had become a constant poison. Few spoke much, but the air was thick with distrustful glances. In the middle of that tension, Mateo's body began to give way. His fever rose, his lips turned blue, and the monitor showed increasingly dangerous arrhythmias. His pain was no longer a muffled moan. It was a strangled cry that bent him on the cot, forcing two medics to hold him down. The chief doctor checked the last note on the chart and shook his head. "The fragments are moving. If we don't act, we'll lose him." The captain, standing at the entrance, frowned. "A second surgery here? After what happened?" Lucia answered without taking her eyes off the soldier. "There's no choice. If we wait, he dies. If we try, at least he has a chance." The tent went silent. Everyone knew what it meant. opening Mateo's chest again, with limited resources, not knowing how many fragments remained or where they were lodged. It was gambling once more with a man's life, and with the lives of those daring to touch the metal hidden inside him. The captain exhaled, resigned. "Very well, but it will be under your lead, nurse. You're the only one who has stayed steady in these conditions." Lucia nodded, though a knot tightened in her stomach. It wasn't pride driving her, but certainty. She couldn't abandon him now. Mateo had survived once thanks to her hands. Letting him die out of fear would be betraying herself. Preparation was fast. No speeches, no time for doubts. Lights adjusted, trays lined up, gauze ready. Outside, the platoon stood in heavy silence, aware that inside, the most dangerous battle was repeating. Not fought with rifles, but with scalpels and steady hands. Mateo, half-conscious, whispered between gasps. "Again?" Lucia leaned close. "Yes, but you're not alone. We're going to take it all out." The scalpel opened the path again. The fresh scar yielded under the precise cut, and blood rose quickly. The assistants worked silently, passing instruments without clinking metal, as if every sound might wake the threats sleeping inside. Deeper in, the first fragment appeared, a dark shard of metal lodged near a blood vessel. The chief doctor hesitated for a second, but Lucia pointed out the right forceps and held the lamp steady. The fragment came free. Leaving a thread of blood, she stopped at once with gentle pressure. "One less," the doctor murmured. But it wasn't enough. Another fragment emerged deeper, buried in the tissue near the heart. This time, tension was sharper. One wrong move could tear the artery. Lucia held her breath, pressing with sterile gauze, clearing the field. The doctor brought the forceps close, and the fragment trembled faintly, as if resisting. The monitor shrieked. Mateo's heart was failing. Lucia reacted instantly, adjusting the oxygen and massaging his side. "Hold on, Mateo. This isn't your end." The young man opened his eyes for a moment and squeezed her hand. It was enough for the doctor to finish the move. The second fragment came free, quivering in the forceps like a dark insect. The whole tent exhaled. At the entrance, the captain closed his eyes briefly. He knew what he was witnessing was more than a medical act. It was a second miracle. Lucia allowed no celebration. There was still suturing, bleeding to control, stability to secure. Her hands stayed firm, stitching the flesh with the discipline of a soldier cleaning his weapon. She would not stop until she was sure Mateo carried no fragments left to the eye. At last she closed the wound and laid a fresh bandage. The monitor steadied. The soldier breathed with effort, but he was alive. Again, Lucia let herself rest her forehead on the table for a few seconds. Her shoulders trembled, not from weakness, but from the release of built-up tension. She had risked everything once more, and again, life had held on at the very edge of death. The echo of the second surgery still lingered in the tent. The air smelled of dried blood, disinfectant, and exhaustion. Mateo's breathing was steadier, but the medical team knew the calm was fragile. The tables were almost bare. Gauze counted one by one, for fluids nearly gone, scalpels worn from use. The field hospital had always been limited, but after 2 back-to-back operations, the shortage was undeniable. Lucia checked the remaining instruments. Bent needles, a few spare sutures, and only a couple of forceps still in good condition. She stayed silent to avoid alarming the others, but the thought echoed in her mind. What if we have to open him again? The idea was unbearable, though not impossible. The chief doctor sat down, his arms heavy on his knees. This can't happen again. If more fragments appear, we'll have nothing left to face them. Lucia, still standing, met his eyes with determination. Then we'll have to make sure nothing is left, even if it costs us the last of what we have. The captain, who had been watching from the entrance, cut in with a harsh tone. It's not just about resources. It's about trust. If someone planted that grenade on purpose, how do we know they won't try again? The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. The shortage wasn't only material, it was moral. Every soldier passing by the tent did so with a mix of respect and suspicion. Mateo's secret was no longer a mystery. It was a symbol of something no one dared say aloud: betrayal. That night, while Mateo slept under sedation, Lucia stepped outside for air. She overheard two soldiers arguing by the fire. It wasn't chance, one said. Someone from our side gave him up. And what if it was a warning of something worse? The other replied. Lucia stayed silent, listening. It was clear the operation had left scars not only on the young man's body, but also on the camp's cohesion. When she returned to the tent, she noticed someone had moved the trays without permission. A box of gauze was open, and one syringe was missing. The chief doctor shook his head. This isn't carelessness. Here every item matters. Someone's coming in when they shouldn't. The shadow of betrayal was becoming tangible. It wasn't paranoia. There were signs. Someone was tampering with supplies, altering boxes, leaving faint traces. No one knew why, but the message was clear. Not everyone in camp was working for the same cause. Lucia walked over to Mateo and watched him sleep. His face, pale as it was, showed a fleeting peace. She knew his survival depended not only on sutures and 4 drips, but also on uncovering who was behind it all. What had begun as an impossible medical case was now tied to a threat walking among them. The captain gathered the medical staff in secret. We can't trust anyone outside this tent. If there's a traitor, they're watching every step. He looked straight at Lucia. And it seems the message was meant for you. She didn't answer. She only clenched her fists. She understood that saving Mateo a second time had been more than a medical act. It was a direct challenge to someone still hiding in the shadows, watching, waiting. The scarcity of the hospital and the certainty of a hidden enemy made every bandage, every dose of medicine, every breath the soldier took feel like defiance against that invisible presence. And though the young man had survived again, the sense was clear. The most dangerous battle had yet to begin. Dawn came with stifling air, thick with dust and humidity. The medical tent felt smaller than ever, as if the canvas had shrunk under the invisible weight of tension. Mateo, who had survived 2 surgeries, began to convulse. His body arched. The monitors fired intermittent alarms, and fever burned through him like an inner fire. Lucia rushed to him without waiting for orders. She pulled back the blankets, held his arm, and shouted to the chief doctor. He's crashing. The doctor bent over, felt the erratic pulse, and said in a grave voice, "The remaining fragments are affecting his heartbeat directly. If we don't intervene now, we'll lose him." The captain, standing at the entrance, stepped forward. "A third operation? You don't have the equipment. You don't have the supplies." Lucia met his eyes, blazing. "We don't have a choice. Either we try, or there'll be a corpse on this cot by morning." The doctor nodded in silence. The air turned electric. Outside, the platoon heard the shouting and the constant beeping, and the hush in their ranks was as tense as the hush inside the tent. Lucia set out what little was left: damp gauze, a scalpel that no longer cut cleanly, a couple of curved needles that had survived the wear. Everything felt insufficient. Even so, she pulled on her gloves and took a breath. Her hands had to stay steady, even if the world around them fell apart. The scalpel opened the wound again. Blood rose fast. A nervous assistant dropped a gauze pad on the floor. The sound was so loud in the silence that everyone flinched. Lucia didn't raise her voice. She simply ordered firm. "Focus. The soldier can't afford mistakes." The doctor slid the forceps in, searching for the metal buried deep. The monitor fell to 60 beats, Then 55. The slow beeping filled the tent like a clock winding down. "We're losing him," whispered a medic. Sweat on her face, Lucia gripped Matteo's hand. "Look at me, Matteo. Don't close your eyes." "Not now." His eyelids trembled and, with an almost impossible effort, he obeyed. That spark of resistance was the push the doctor needed. He advanced the forceps a millimeter and, with a careful move, pulled out a small fragment, shining under the light. The monitor climbed, 55 to 70. The room exhaled, but no one cheered. The danger stayed. Lucia cleared the blood and held the field open with precision. The doctor hunted for more splinters while the heart hammered hard against the ribs. Then, for a moment, it stopped. The monitor drew the flat line everyone feared. Time froze. No one moved, as if the universe itself held its breath. Lucia grabbed the manual paddles, rubbed them quickly, and delivered a shock. Matteo's body arched. The monitor stayed mute. A second shock. A short beep. Then silence. The third attempt came with the force of desperation. The soldier's body jerked, and suddenly a beat. Then another. The monitor gave a faint, real beeping. "Got him!" the doctor cried, voice breaking. Lucia allowed herself a second of relief, but kept the field steady. The heart was beating, yes, but fragile, as if each strike could be the last. The second fragment appeared, lodged in nearby tissue. With a surgeon's touch and everyone holding their breath, it was removed. The monitor rose to 85. The beeping grew steadier. Life remained, hanging by a thread thin enough that any gust could cut it. When the wound was closed again, the entire camp was on edge. Outside, soldiers stared at the glowing canvas, convinced time had stopped inside. Within, Lucia finally lowered her arms, her hands shaking not from fear, but from total exhaustion. Matteo breathed, weak but present. The nurse looked at him and whispered, "One more time, you're here." Matteo opened his eyes with difficulty after the third surgery. His breathing was uneven, but his heartbeat was no longer racing out of control. It was tired, fragile, yet still keeping the rhythm of life. Lucia sat beside him, eyelids red from lack of sleep. She didn't let go of his hand. The soldier looked at her with a mix of relief and regret. "I don't know how you're still here," he murmured, voice breaking. "You saved me more than once, and I don't deserve this." Lucia looked at him firmly. "You're alive. That's all that matters right now." But Matteo couldn't stay silent any longer. His lips trembled, and his eyes carried a weight that had nothing to do with the fever. "There's something you don't know, something I've kept quiet since I got to the front." Lucia squeezed his hand. "Don't talk too much. You're not strong." He shook his head. "If I don't say it now, I might never be able to." He drew a hard breath and went on. "The blast that hurt me, it wasn't like they told it. I was closer to the enemy line than I should have been. I was ordered to wait, but I moved ahead without permission. I wanted to prove I could, and then something dropped in front of me. It wasn't some random grenade. It was placed, like someone knew I'd be there." Lucia frowned. "Are you saying it was an ambush set up for you?" Matteo closed his eyes, tears sliding down his cheeks. "Not just for me, for my squad. But I pulled the others into that trap. 3 didn't make it out, and I came back with this curse in my chest." Silence filled the tent. His words hit harder than any explosion. Lucia watched him without looking away, taking in what his confession meant. He wasn't only a victim of war. He also carried the guilt of disobeying and triggering a tragedy. "Is that why you accepted so quickly the idea that something was still inside you?" she asked softly. "Yes," he whispered, "because I feel it, every second, not only in my body, but in my memory. I'm not just the one who survived the impossible. I'm the one who doomed others. Lucia took a deep breath. The instinct to judge him mixed with the compassion of seeing him so vulnerable. The truth was that, despite his mistake, he had fought to stay alive, and she had risked everything to save him more than once. The chief doctor came in then and sensed the heavy air. He checked the readings and said, "He's weak but stable. He needs rest." Matteo looked at him with red eyes. "Don't let me sleep without someone knowing." The doctor frowned. "Know what?" Lucia stepped in, placing a hand on the soldier's shoulder. "I know, and that's enough for now. Rest." Matteo closed his eyes again, breathing heavy but calmer. The secret was no longer only inside him. Now it was a weight shared, and Lucia would carry it in silence. Deep down, she understood that Matteo's past didn't just explain his guilt. It tied into the suspicion of betrayal eating away at the camp. If someone had set that trap on purpose, then the grenade wasn't an accident. It was a message, and that secret marked the start of a darker truth still to come. Matteo's confession lingered in the tent like an open wound. The silence that followed was heavy, but deep down, Lucia knew it wasn't the whole truth. Pieces didn't fit. The cleanness of the initial wound, the way the device had lodged without exploding, the strange tampering with supplies in the medical store. It all pointed to something more than chance or a battlefield mistake. That night, while checking the scarce inventory, Lucia found a folded envelope under a box of gauze. No name, no seal, just a handwritten line. "It wasn't for him. It was for you." The message froze her blood. She pulled back the canvas flap and went straight to the captain. She showed him the envelope. He read it twice, jaw tightening. "This confirms what we feared." He looked her straight in the eye. "They weren't after just a soldier. They were after you." Lucia felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Why me? I'm only a nurse." "You're not only that," the captain replied. "You've saved men everyone else gave up on. You've proven the impossible can be done. To the enemy, you're an obstacle. And to a traitor inside, you're a target." The revelation was as absurd as it was painful. The grenade in Matteo's chest had been a trap, yes, but also a symbolic message. To warn her that even her steady hands could fail, that war could creep into the most intimate part of her calling. When she returned to the tent, she found Matteo awake. His pale face showed his weakness, but his eyes carried weight. "I heard," he whispered. "The message was for you, wasn't it?" Lucia didn't deny it. She sat beside him and took his hand. "Yes, they wanted to prove that not even I could hold on to life when death insisted." The soldier squeezed her fingers with what little strength he had. "Then, I was the vehicle. They used me to reach you." "It's not your fault," she answered firmly, though rage burned inside her. "The fault belongs to whoever planned this from within." The chief doctor entered then, catching her last words, and frowned. "If that's true, it means someone here knows our routines, our weak spots, and tried to break the one person keeping calm in this hospital." The captain confirmed with a nod. The nurse was the target, and that makes everything personal. The words cut deep. Lucia understood it was no longer just about saving a patient. She herself was part of the shadow game now, and her strength had become the bullseye of a calculated strike. During the early hours, she sat again beside Matteo. The soldier slept fitfully, muttering fragments of fever dreams. Lucia watched him with eyes full of determination. If the message had been for her, then the response also had to come from her hands. She would not let that threat, disguised as a weapon, strip away what she defended most: life in the middle of war. The revelation changed everything. The grenade was not only a deadly object lodged in a young body. It was a warning, a provocation, a challenge thrown directly at her. And the war, which until then had been an external noise, now took root in the most intimate part of her personal mission. Dawn came tinted with a strange red, as if the sky mirrored the blood Lucia had so often seen spill in the medical tent. She had barely slept. The envelope found beneath the gauze would not leave her mind. It wasn't for him. It was for you. That message still burned in her memory. Now she knew the grenade was more than a deadly device. It was a personal warning, a provocation meant to break her. The captain gathered the troops in formation, his face stone-hard. Last night we confirmed what many suspected. There is a traitor among us. Someone who knows our routines, who tampers with our supplies, and who tried to break morale by using one of our men as a vehicle. Silence fell. No one moved. Rifles hung still, but eyes darted, searching for invisible culprits. In the tent, Matteo heard the captain's voice from afar. Lucia sat beside him, changing his bandage with slow, almost ceremonial movements. The soldier watched her with clouded eyes. If they find out who it was, what will they do? He asked. Lucia kept her eyes on the wound. What war dictates? An exemplary punishment. And if it's someone close? Matteo pressed. She hesitated. The question was dangerous, because in the tent, everyone was close. Finally, she answered. Then the sacrifice will be doubled, because it won't just be the end of a traitor, but also the end of what little trust we had left. Soon after, the answer came on its own. A stretcher-bearer, the same one who had been nervous during the first surgery, was caught tampering again with the medical boxes. In his pocket they found another note, in the same handwriting as the message to Lucia. This time there was no doubt. He was the bridge between the enemy and the camp. The captain dragged him to the center of camp. The troops circled around. Silence was sepulchral. The man trembled, but his lips repeated a phrase like a prayer. It wasn't for him. It was for her. She had to fail. Lucia heard it from the tent. Her heart pounded violently in her chest. She didn't need to see him to understand. They had wanted to break her will, to prove that even her steady hands could be defeated. The captain raised his weapon, but Lucia ran forward and stood in the way. Enough! She cried. I don't deny what he did, but don't turn him into another message. If you execute him here, you'll only prove the enemy has divided us to the core. The circle of soldiers murmured. Some nodded, others demanded revenge. The captain lowered the weapon slowly, eyes locked on the nurse. What do you propose then? Lucia drew a deep breath. That he answer for what he did, yes. But don't let him be the excuse to lose what's left of our humanity. We are soldiers, doctors, men and women trapped in this war. If we let betrayal turn us into executioners, then they've already won. The troops went quiet. It was Matteo, his voice weak from the cot, who broke the tension. She saved me 3 times already. If she says don't kill him, then listen to her. The captain lowered his head and ordered the man locked up, not shot. A small gesture in the chaos, but a moral victory nonetheless. Lucia returned to Matteo. Her eyes were wet, but steady. Today we saved more than a life, she whispered. We saved what little humanity we still have. The young man squeezed her hand. Thank you. Not just for me. For everyone. The nurse then understood that sacrifice wasn't always giving one's life in a heroic instant. Sometimes, sacrifice was holding calm, choosing compassion in the middle of violence, drawing a thin line between military duty and the humanity war tried so hard to erase. The camp awoke to a strange kind of silence, different from other mornings. It wasn't the silence of fear or of bottled tension. It was a heavy breath, a brief pause after days that had felt endless. The sky opened with a pale orange glow, streaked with distant smoke from the fighting, as if even the sunlight carried scars. Lucia stepped out of the tent with tired eyes, but her head held high. She had spent the night watching over Matteo, who now slept deeply after the last surgery. The young man was still weak, but his vital signs were steady. For the first time since it all began, she allowed herself to think that life had won, even if only by a thread. The captain was waiting outside, flanked by 2 officers. They didn't speak, only watched the horizon. When they saw her, they gave a brief nod. They understood that what had happened was not only a medical battle, but also a moral lesson. Military discipline had demanded immediate punishment, but Lucia had reminded them that humanity could not be sacrificed in the name of war without paying an even higher price. "Today we wake up different," the captain said quietly, his gaze fixed on the sun. "We will lose men, we will lose battles, but if we lose who we are, then there will be no reason to fight." Lucia nodded in silence. She knew his words were true. The traitor was under custody, his fate still to be decided, but the choice not to execute him had given the camp back something they thought lost: the ability to choose not to become a reflection of the enemy. As she walked back to the tent, Lucia thought of what they had lost: gauze, scalpels for fluids, resources growing scarcer by the day. They had lost trust too. Soldiers no longer looked at one another with the ease they once had. And yet, they had gained something intangible: a certainty that even in the mud and blood, it was still possible to draw a line and say, "The darkness ends here. Beyond it, we resist as human beings." Inside the tent, Matteo opened his eyes just as she approached. "Is it morning already?" he asked, voice rough. "Yes," Lucia answered with a faint smile. "And this dawn belongs to us." The soldier tried to sit up, but she gently stopped him. "Don't push yourself. You've fought enough." He sighed. "I lost comrades, I carry this scar, and yet I'm still here. I don't know if it's luck or punishment." Lucia looked at him seriously. "It's life, and as long as you breathe, there will always be something worth resisting for." The young man closed his eyes again, calmer now. Outside, the soldiers lined up to receive orders. Their faces showed fatigue, but also a new calm. The shadow of betrayal was still there. No one denied it, but the way it had been faced left a mark. They had learned that not all victories are loud, nor do all triumphs come with medals. Sometimes what is won is invisible. Dignity, the belief that something good remains in the middle of horror. Lucia returned to her desk and wrote a note in her notebook. "In this war, we've lost too much. But tonight, at least, we didn't lose what makes us human. And that, though small, is also a victory." The dawn after the storm did not erase the pain, nor bring back the fallen. But it offered a breath, a reminder that even though war always demands its price, it was still possible to choose how to face it. Between what was lost and what was gained remained one certainty: that resisting with humanity was the greatest act of courage. The camp returned to its war routine: guards, orders, distant gunfire. Life went on, as if nothing that had happened had left a mark on the torn ground. But in Lucia, the scar was deep, invisible, and permanent. Matteo breathed with difficulty, though stable, under clean bandages. He was the living symbol of 2 impossible victories. And yet, every time Lucia closed her eyes, she didn't see the relief of having saved him, but the moment when life and death tangled together on her table. In her mind, she still heard the uneven beeping of the monitor, the absolute silence when his heart stopped, the dry sound of the grenade falling into the metal tray. Those echoes did not vanish with daylight or with the rumble of engines outside. They were ghosts lodged in her memory, as impossible to remove as the fragments left in Matteo's body. At night, when all grew quiet, she would step outside the tent and look at the horizon. In the distance, the sky glowed with fire and smoke. The wind carried a familiar smell: gunpowder, wet earth sweat. It was the same air she had breathed inside the improvised operating room, where a single mistake could have erased them all. And again she felt the pressure in her hands, the alien pulse beating against her fingers, the metallic threat vibrating just centimeters from life. Matteo, grateful, tried to smile at her each time he woke. He told her it was a miracle to still be there, that nothing would have been possible without her. Lucia answered with brief gestures, a smile that never reached her eyes. She knew the boy needed to believe in victory, and she allowed him that. But deep down, she understood she had paid a price no one could see, carrying memories that could never be stitched shut. The captain congratulated her in private. "You've done more than your duty. You've shown that even in war there is space for life." She thanked him with a nod, but inside repeated another truth. She had saved a man, yes, but had lost part of herself in the process. Every time someone looked at her as the nurse who achieved the impossible, she would remember that the impossible had also marked her with invisible wounds. In her notebook, she wrote at the end of the day, "A body can heal with stitches, but the mind cannot be sewn. I saved a soldier twice. I, on the other hand, have no cure. War didn't kill me, but it trapped me in its memory." She slipped the notebook under her pillow and lay on her cot. Outside, war kept roaring indifferent. Inside, in the dark, Lucia understood she had found the true boundary of her work. She could defy death with gauze and scalpels. She could pull grenades from a soldier's chest. She could stabilize hearts on the edge of silence. But she could not escape memory. The nurse who had saved the impossible would forever be marked by what she had seen, by what she had heard, by what she had held in her hands. And though the troops would remember her as a heroine, she knew she could never save herself from the memories war had planted deep in her soul. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments which part moved you the most. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the bell, and give a like so you won't miss more stories like this one. See you next time!